We're joined today by
J.R. Romano.
Hey, everybody. J.R. Romano here with the Connecticut Republicans Chairman. It's been a wild and interesting week. What can I tell you? We've had discussions on forced regionalization, which turned dark very quickly. You had a state rep. I'll play the clip.
You do understand that the state is the responsible entity for all the towns. The state only allows the towns to exist by statute and by constitution. That is, oh yeah. Take a look.
So I'm gonna say it again because at next time we'll have to have you remove.
That is the state has a responsibility.
I would say that the voters are the people who are in charge of the state, not vice versa.
You have to go by the law. I'm not going to continue this, and thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you for any other question? Thank you for your testimony.
That's right. She basically said to the state of Connecticut, you exist, your towns exist because we allow you to exist. Talk about the idea that, we know that Democrats in general, their policies don't lend to liberty or freedom. We are here and exist to serve them, to serve their policies. You must agree and obey. If not, face the consequences. And we know this because we've already talked a little bit in regards to, last week I touched on Jason Rojas, who basically said, do as we tell you or face penalties. And then literally Senator Bergstein, once again, calling for her own district, her own constituents to be penalized for not supporting tolls because Stanford voted on a resolution condemning tolls in which, as a senator, she has condemned Stanford. We are in wild times, and basically media is not paying attention, but let's keep going. You have this whole idea on the forced regionalization, and I didn't touch on it that much in the last podcast, but what we're seeing unfold here is that if you are in favor of the idea that a local town should have control of its own destiny and control over its own quality of education, then you're racist. That's basically what the Democrat Party is saying. And the irony here is I'm gonna use my own experience. My growing up in the city of Derby, which is a small town, but it's a blue-collar town. I think the average annual income is around $40,000 a year. So it's not a wealthy town, right? It's not Darien. It's not Wilton. And what I find astonishing, and by the way, I don't know the demographics now, but I know when I was in high school that it was a majority, I'm going to say Italian, but a majority white community, but it was very diverse. Statistically, I think it was something like 25 or 30% of the community was, in fact, people of color. And I was so fortunate to grow up in that environment. But what I find ironic is that Woodbridge, Connecticut would never, back then, want to join with Derby. It had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with economics and the quality of education. But at the end of the day, the city of Derby, we had an opportunity several decades ago to actually regionalize with Ansonia. And at the time, we decided to invest in our own destiny. The city of Derby said, not now. We're not ready to regionalize. And a lot of it had to do with athletic programs, and we had great rivalries back then, football with Derby and Ansonia, which at the time were great revenue generators for the schools. And as time went on, the schools shrunk a little bit. The rivalry obviously is still there for Derby and Ansonia, but the crushing costs and unfunded mandates and what it's like to do business in the state of Connecticut has eventually got to the school system. So now Derby and Ansonia, upon their own volition, upon their own, choosing their own destiny, is choosing to explore the possibility of regionalization. Nothing to do with the state of Connecticut. Nothing to do with anything else. Because what Derby and Ansonia recognizes is that they need each other. And maybe that's what the study is going to show, that these two communities can come together and have a great school system. But the problem with what's being proposed now from the state of Connecticut in this terms of this forced regionalization is that it will not be self-determination. It will not be parents and superintendents and Board of Education members controlling their own destiny, having the freedom to have their own school system. And what I find most embarrassing for the Democratic Party when they talk about this idea that somehow these communities that are trying to protect their own sovereignty is racism, when these are the same elected officials, the same ones who stood silently, let me say that again, stood silently when a young African-American woman who was simply trying to get a better education for her son was sentenced to jail for stealing an education. Where was Roland Lamar's protest when she served time for stealing an education? They all want to talk about what's right. You know what would be right? If this state was a school choice state, that'd solve the problem. And then it wouldn't matter, these regionalization issues. If we were a school choice state, if this was a state that believed in freedom, none of this would be an issue, right? Because if I had the ability to choose where I sent my child to school, regardless of the zip code that I was in, this wouldn't be an issue. But it's convenient for the Democrats to talk this way because anytime you oppose one of their policies, they divert to calling people names like racist, sexist, bigot, all of these things. I remember being called a racist when I spoke out against Obamacare, right? Don't you remember that? This is where all of this started. You speak against a policy and immediately the Democrats will cast you and chastise you and tar and feather you and label you a racist or a sexist, not based on anything. And by the way, there were children who testified about protecting the sovereignty of their school districts, and they were labeled racist by the Democrats. This is how far we've gone because they are incapable of having an intellectual and honest conversation about how bad their policies are, so they must revert to name calling. And what I find so amazing about the Democrats is that when they talk about the state of Connecticut, they always talk about selling Connecticut and talking how great. And this is one of the things. And I'm going to bring on Michael Barbaro. He's the head of the Connecticut Real Estate Association, and I'm probably going to bring this up with him. But Connecticut's quality of education is one of our highest selling points, and the Democrats are trying to destroy it because God knows they don't know how to do anything right. We're billions in the hole. They are not managing the state of Connecticut, so now they want to control the quality of education in our communities. It's insane. It is wildly insane because at the end of the day, they can't face their own failures. And that's always what happens. I mean, let's look at it from the most basic perspective. Let's look at a family dynamic. Let's look at any relationship, just personal relationship we've had. And we've all been there before when we're just having a discussion on the quality of the Yankees pitching staff or whether or not Jason Varitek should be in the Hall of Fame or any other mundane topic that you may debate, which brewery's better in the state of Connecticut, whatever it may be. And whenever you're having a discussion or an argument with someone, we all recognize and know when the person making the point is losing the argument, and we've all been in relationships with our significant others where this happens too, the first person to call you a name usually is the person losing the argument. Right? That's their default, to shame you because they no longer want to hear the truth. Right? You see this all the time when you have a situation, and I've been in this situation, when we're talking about interventions with people who are struggling and you're showing them facts and they lash out and they call names. And this is what's happening to the Democratic Party. They cannot articulate and argue that their policies are actually going to lead to success because all they're worried about is revenues and controlling more of the money, and so they must shame you. They must shame you. And they've been doing it for probably a decade now. This is their default. And what always makes me laugh is in their minds, they're impugned from criticism. Right? They can't, we had there was a Democrat state rep that wrote an op-ed about how we can't question her because she's a woman. And literally that's I wish that I was joking, but I'm not. But this is how far we've fallen. And some of the things they're saying, I'm gonna read a tweet from our new freshman senator from down in Fairfield County. This one's classic. This is in regards to tolls. The protesters will tell you tolls are taxes. The reality is that tolls are user fees. So I used my time to ask if anyone who bought train tickets complained that they were paying taxes. Turns out they didn't. Yeah, here's the thing, Will. I should say Senator. I'll be respectful. I don't know if you're familiar with the term synonym. So you may have missed that class. I know you recently graduated college. So a synonym is when you have two different words that mean the same thing. That's what a user fee and a tax is. The difference between, say, the train and our roads is that unless you want everyone to walk to work, we don't have a choice. If I get on a train, it's by choice. That is a user fee. Driving to work or taking my children to school, these are things that are necessities. And the idea, and that point aside, we already pay user fees in our gas tax, right? That's why we have such a high gas tax. For those that don't know, we have one of the highest gas taxes in the country. We pay a lot in terms of taxes because we pay a tax at the point when the oil comes into for distribution, and then we pay a tax again at the pump. So Connecticut's getting a lot of gas tax. And so this idea that somehow we aren't already paying taxes for transportation is poppycock. I'm going to use that word all the time now. It's poppycock, Will. You are using synonyms to try to pretend as though it's not going to cost people money. So whether you want to call it a user fee or a tax, single moms across this state are going to be ordered to pay up to $1,000 more a year simply to drive to work. All because you think you deserve it. You as a Democrat politician believe you're entitled to her labor. $1,000 more. It's money she can't spend on a new car, a college savings account, to feed her children, maybe to move to a better neighborhood. Congratulations, Will. You've made life harder for single parents around the state, because that's what you're going to do. Pretend all you want. This is a failure. That's what this is. The Democrats have failed to lead yet again, and it's about revenue, revenue, revenue. And let me explain something. And I've said this before. Democrats don't look at us as residents. They look at us like revenue sources. You are nothing more than a tax ID number to them. Something to extract your labor from. That's the thing that makes me laugh about like this idea of like communism, when it talks about like how a CEO is, you're taking my labor, right? But that's exactly what the state is doing. The state is demanding your labor, your money, simply because they think they know what's best for you. Not always the case, right? Don't worry, we'll take care of you. We know what's best. And my favorite is, and we'll play the clip again, Senator Bergstein, you got to love it. Here's a clip of her talking about this poll where people said they were against tolls. But if you reword it, and here, you know what? Listen.
Polling data shows that when people are asked, are you for or against tolls, 57% say they're against tolls, but when the question is reframed as, are you for or against tolls, if you're assured that all of the revenue from tolls will go to improve transportation, the number flips to 57% in favor.
Okay. So essentially what she's saying is, let's reword it and pretend, because do you really think you can trust Democrats to spend the money on what they promised to spend it on? We voted for a lockbox, and basically Ned Lamont has raided the transportation fund to use it to cover operating whatever he did with it. And now he says we don't have any money in the special transportation fund. So that's why we need tolls. They're lying to you. You cannot trust what they're doing. They have been lying to you over and over and over again. And I go back to this idea, and I know that I mentioned it a few weeks ago. Gently remind your friends and family who voted for Democrats what they've done to us. It's costing you $1,000 more a year simply to drive to work. It's sad. It's sad. So, and I always feel like I'm being a Debbie Downer, right? I'm this. I wish that we could talk about something that excited us. The possibility of a new company coming to the state, or something that is turning things around. It's not there. Why don't we bring on Michael Barbaro right now? Michael Barbaro with the Connecticut Realtors Association is going to be joining us. All right, joining me now, Michael Barbaro from the Connecticut Realtors Association. And Mike and I actually ran into each other at a Dunkin' Donuts on our way to work. And we got into a discussion about how disappointing Ned Lamont's budget and everything, the tolling and everything that's happening. And Mike, I wanted to bring you on because you gave me some statistics that I think for anyone listening, their home is for a vast majority of people the biggest investment they have. And what you had told me about what's happening in the Connecticut marketplace was absolutely scary. So I wanted to bring you on and talk a little bit about that. So Michael Barbaro, everybody.
So the statistic that I shared with you was basically between 2010 and 2017, the national average for house appreciation, people's single-family homes value appreciation, was 43.3%. In Connecticut, it wasn't even a whole number; it was 0.8%.
So just one second. I want you to repeat that. I want you to say that again. I want everyone to understand exactly what you were saying.
Sure. Yeah. So, look, there's an interesting thing about this too, right? This wasn't a statistic that the Connecticut Association of Realtors or the National Association of Realtors massaged to make it look better. We got that statistic from a copy of an OPM report that was given to then Governor-elect Ned Lamont sometime in either late November, early December last year. So this is an OPM statistic showing that 43.3% was the national average appreciation, and Connecticut was last at 0.8%, not even a full 1% of appreciation.
Wow. And what does that mean to an average family? What does that mean?
So that means for every $100,000 worth of value in some parts of the country, they saw a $43,000 appreciation. In Connecticut, they saw a $100 appreciation. Wow. For every $100,000 worth of value, right? And so look, and here's what we're seeing now. And this is no surprise to us. I mean, we've fought these battles before, but we're seeing several more taxes on real estate are rearing their head again. So whether it is an expanded seller's conveyance tax, or whether it is a sales tax on services, which would mean real estate commissions, it would mean the closing attorney's fees, it would mean any professional that you hired for the transaction of real estate, whether that was a home inspector or an engineer or anything to that effect. Effectively, what that does is it just devalues your home even more. When a seller walks away from the closing table, they don't care what the line item is called, whether it's called a sales tax on commissions or a buyer's conveyance tax, a seller's conveyance tax. The bottom line is it erodes the value of a house even further. And we are just at a point right now where we cannot take any more hits on real estate. So for us, I mean, this is critical. This is critical that we have a dialogue and say, do no more harm to people's, as you said, it's not only people's most precious investment, in many cases, it's people's only investment.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part for people to understand, and everywhere in Connecticut, what I think frustrates me the most, and I talk about this a lot, is that, where I'm from, I grew up in Derby, Connecticut. Those families where their homes are their only investment, right? For many of the people that I'm friends with and that I know, they're trapped here, right? They cannot move to a better quote unquote state that is more tax friendly, more business friendly. They're literally trapped in these houses that have not regained their value from the collapse. Meanwhile, the wealthy people who have somehow, and this is the thing that I find most frustrating, and I don't know if you've seen this in the real estate market, particularly in Fairfield County, but they're the ones that can't afford to leave. And so they're not as invested in the culture the Democrats have created where they're just revenue hungry, because, they can sell their house and move to, somewhere else and not think about $100,000 loss or the fact that their homes have been flat in terms of value. I don't know if the Fairfield County numbers are any different, if the market's slowing. I mean, are you seeing any of that?
Yeah, so the high-end market is particularly aggrieved by all this stuff. So, the more expensive houses get, the worse. I mean, that was an average that I gave you, about 0.8%. But I will tell you, many of these houses have never recovered from 2006 or to 2008 when we had the mortgage crisis. So some of these houses will never see those values, right? And I often used to say this when I met with legislators, and we met with any legislator that would meet with us, and prior to the election in the last two sessions. This is a huge problem, man, because here, look, I can give you a metric on the people that have their houses for sale that are leaving the state. I have no metric for the people who are so far underwater that they can't sell their house but would leave the state if they could sell their house, if they had the money, or if they could at least break even on the sale. So this is something that is particularly scary to us as an association. If we did see some price appreciation and we're going to lose people, I don't disagree with you that there are people that are stuck here based on home values, and there's also people that are stuck here based on their familial situation. I mean, my parents are stuck here because they want to see their grandkids. I have 3 children, and my parents want to be in their children's lives, their grandchildren's lives. But at some point when, God forbid something happens to one of my parents, our family will pay the price, whether it's in death tax or whatever the case might be. So people are stuck here, and people are stuck here for different reasons. But look, I'm not here to bash Ned Lamont. I'm not here to bash legislative leaders on either side of the aisle, right? This is a difference in not people. It's a difference in ideology, right? It's, again, going back to the well and saying we're just going to take real estate. And I don't think it should be disproportionately associated with real estate or services. And that's what we're facing right now. And you could look at it. I've heard Ned Lamont's speech said, why are some things taxed and some things aren't? That's a valid argument, JR. I'm not going to dispute whether that's a valid argument. However, that is the baseline. So any change to the baseline is a disproportionate change, right? So if we can keep the baseline as it is, but to come out and say we're just going to now start taxing these services and this is brand new, but let's look at the effect that this has on someone's house. When someone sells their house, and this is why the seller's conveyance tax is a particularly fond target of the Democrats, is to come out here and say, if we can tax real estate, you get to the closing table and your attorney hands you a piece of paper and says, this is how much we got, and these are all the deductions that are coming out of it. For many people, that is the first time they're hearing of a seller conveyance tax. And now on top of that, they're going to see a sales tax on their sales commission. They're going to see a sales tax on the attorney's fees, and they're going to see a sales tax on any other professional fee that's associated with it. Bottom line, my clients don't care what you call it. If it erodes the bottom line and erodes the check that they walk out of that closing with, they've devalued their property.
Well, so here's the other thing in terms of, and I think that this is also a great point to bring up. So for many people, as the value of their home increases and they want to refinance maybe and do some home improvement, all of that dries up as well. I mean, I know I went through this. I went to refinance, my home, and literally I struggled with the value in what was basically deemed the value of my home because it wasn't nearly I didn't have any equity. I was 100% flat over, I think I purchased in 2009. And so you're sitting here saying, okay, I was going to refinance and maybe take that money to do a home improvement project. Or all these little things add up into why our economy is struggling, because if you can't do home improvement, guess what? Then the contractor doesn't have a job. The home improvement store isn't selling the wood, isn't selling the merchant. I mean, it is a compounding problem for so many people in the state of Connecticut. And I don't know, whenever I hear politicians, particularly right now in Hartford, and it is the Democrats talking about this, we have a revenue problem. We don't have a revenue problem. I think that we have almost a disingenuous and dishonest conversation with particularly Democrat candidate, or I should say Democrat elected officials, because they don't want to take ownership to their failures. And they don't want to look at the real problem, like what's happening in the real estate market. Who's to blame for that? I mean, what do you think the biggest problem or the biggest cause of what's happened in the real estate market, which is impacting so many people?
So we have statistics all over the place, right? Someone buys a house, how many jobs are created from it? When people buy houses, they go out, they go to Home Depot, they buy things, they hire contractors. They hire painters. They're hiring landscapers. They're buying carpeting. They're buying furniture at the local stores. So when the house market is depressed, it absolutely has a trickle-down impact on the economy. That's indisputable, and I'm happy to have that debate with anybody, anytime, because our National Association spends many, many hours tracking that information just to see the impact we have on there. Whose fault is it? Look, I've got my theory on whose fault it is, but here's what I'm going to tell you. The worst part about this is that we're making things worse. We're adding insult to injury, and we're going out there, and we're making rules, and we're making laws, and we're passing legislation. We're proposing additional taxes, and we're not looking at the unintended consequences. And I'll give you an example. So for years, we've fought a buyer's conveyance tax, right? Municipalities want to have a buyer's conveyance tax so that they can have 1% on top of it. I will tell you this. I am at the closing table. My agents, our members, we are at the closing table with people where if the price of their insurance policy for the year changes, it might be the difference on whether or not they can buy that house. That is not hyperbole. That is an actual example. I had a client the estimate on their homeowner's insurance went up. It changed what their percentage ratios would be, and they almost could not close on that house. So to think innocently that a 1% buyer's tax on top of the money that the buyers are already coming to the table with is not going to have an impact. It's just naive. It's wrong. And so we're here. We're not saying, and I think realtors are in a very unique position, right? Number one, we sit at the kitchen tables of everybody in the state of Connecticut, whether they're selling a $50,000 condominium or a $25 or $30 million state. Connecticut has a very, very diverse real estate market. We know the reasons people come to Connecticut, and we know the reasons people are walking out the door leaving Connecticut. And it's uncertainty. And is it the roads? Absolutely. There's an element of that. But if jobs are leaving, if businesses are leaving, if South Carolina is knocking on the door of some of my commercial members, clients, and courting them and saying, come to South Carolina. We will source you a building. We will buy your equipment if it's specialized equipment, and we will put it in our VOTEC schools, and we will train your employees. When that starts happening, when they are coming, and they're not just taking the big corporations. They're coming and knocking on the doors of the corporations and the companies that have 30 to 50 people. That's what hurts there. Those people leave, and this accelerates the problem, and it gets worse and worse, exponentially worse, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Buyer's conveyance tax is well-intentioned. They want to buy open space with them. Hartford, I think Luke's a very smart guy. I think he's a great guy. Every time I've heard Luke speak, he talks about the tax base in Hartford, 50% of their grand list is non-taxable. Yet Hartford fought to get on to be able to participate in a 1% buyer's conveyance tax. That 1% is supposed to go toward buying open space. Look, I'm not an economist, but I'm pretty sure I know what that means. That means you're going to buy more property, which will then be off the grand list. So it's just not jiving for me, and I have to think, where is that money going to go?
Well, and you know what's funny about Hartford? I mean, we moved our office out of Hartford because, I went from going $21 a square foot to $9, paying for parking. So it was $21 a square foot plus parking, to a space now where it's $9 a square foot and it's free parking. But the other thing about Hartford, and this is the part where I don't think a lot of people understand that don't necessarily own a business. They may work for a business when we're talking about some of these communities. So my copier, which is 10 years old, was costing me something like $680 a year in property tax. It's like, well, are you kidding? Literally almost $1,000 in taxes for just one copier. Never mind. And this is what no one understands. I pay for the chairs and the desk, all the property tax a small business would have to pay. So we moved our office, and we immediately saved something like $2,500 a year just on local property tax. And when you're talking about Hartford using, like this, to your point, a buyer's conveyance tax to try to make up for revenue shortfalls, it accelerates the cycle of disaster. And because they're not being honest about, and when you go into the Hartford City Hall and you look at all these different divisions and titles and employees they have, half of them, I don't know what they're doing. And it gets back to this core idea of what our government should be doing and what our tax dollars should be going towards. And that's where this big issue on tolls and they're raiding the Special Transportation Fund, which is supposed to have a lockbox. So much for that. So they're raiding it and then saying they don't have any money to fix the roads.
Sure. I mean, look, tolls, do we need to do something with our roads? Absolutely, right? Will tolls disproportionately impact our members? We drive around all day. We don't have the luxury. If someone wants to see a building or a property or a home or a condominium, we don't have the luxury to say, hey, let's do it outside of congestion and timing. We are going to be directly impacted. And look, we know something has to be done, right? We absolutely do. But one of the things that has to happen is you have to bring in all the stakeholders, and you have to look and say, how do you see this affecting your industry? And let's put it together. Let's work those things out behind the scenes, right?
So I'm going to ask you that. I'm going to change gears a little bit here. What do you think the biggest thing, Republican Democrat stuff aside, for you and being an expert and the person in charge of the Connecticut Realtors Association, what is the biggest policy change that you think could help improve the situation here in Connecticut?
So this is not necessarily the position of the association. This is my position. I think we have to get out of the way of business in Connecticut. We are not necessarily a business-friendly state. We're not necessarily friendly to anybody that wants to do anything in this state. And so we have to do something to get out of the way to bring business here. I'll give you an example. Connecticut has something called the Transfer Act. Not many people understand it. People that do understand it are commercial real estate investors and commercial real estate brokers. The Transfer Act in the state of Connecticut was designed to help clean up environmentally challenged properties, brownfields. However, if you set out to write a piece of legislation that would disincentivize economic development in your state, you could not write a bill as onerous as the Transfer Act in Connecticut. So our practitioners bring people to the state of Connecticut, and people look at a property. And if there is a remote chance that this property could be what they call classified as an establishment, and therefore fall underneath the Transfer Act, the property sits there and never gets developed. So you drive around and you look at these buildings and you say, why doesn't anybody do anything with that building? 95% of the time it's because that property falls under the Connecticut Transfer Act and people want nothing to do with it. What we're saying is, and this is one thing, is saying, look, we understand. No one is saying that these properties should not be cleaned up environmentally. No one is saying that these properties should slip through any cracks. But what we are saying, and as the practitioners in the field, and the practical experience we bring, is it is having a counteractive effect on this. You're not getting the attention. Properties are sitting there without being cleaned up. So a well-intentioned bill and well-intentioned legislation is having such a negative impact on the economy. We're right now trying to champion the study. I think we might have even hired someone to do it. I'm not sure where we stand on it. Show the impact of what the Transfer Act in the state of Connecticut is doing. How would that piece of property? And we have practitioners that have said we are losing people that'll go over the border into Massachusetts because Massachusetts has a very effective law. It is not as onerous as our law. It's easier to navigate. And so all we're asking, and again, this is an interesting perspective for me from the realtor's position, because I've spent a lot of time in the LA, and I've spent a lot of time listening to people testify. We are not asking for anything specifically. We're just asking to help. So you say, what is the best policy change? The best policy change that can happen is we sit back and we take a look at all the things that are driving business out of this state, because it all boils down to jobs, JR. No one comes to any of our residential practitioners without a job. No one comes and says, I'm pre-approved for a mortgage, and I don't have a job.
Right.
So you need to have a job. We need to bring business here. We have to, and look, any money that we wasted on trying to get Amazon to come here, if we spent 45 cents on a stamp, we wasted 45 cents. It's not going to happen. It's nice. It sounded good. Maybe it gave DCD some work. But the fact of the matter is we need to make an environment, not just for the Alexions of the world, not just for the first five. We need to make an environment where people say, if we need to do business in or around New York City or Boston, we absolutely have to be here in the state of Connecticut. Then people can come and they can enjoy our culture. They can benefit from one of the best public education systems in the country, if not in the world. I don't know. But until we get a place and a way for people to earn a living, they're not going to come here to recreate. They're not going to come here for education or for their family. And so jobs is paramount. But let's look at it, and let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's bring in the people who understand the nuance of what is going on, what impact legislation like the Transfer Act has on economic development. because it's not purely an environmental issue. And to say that everybody that's involved in commercial real estate doesn't care about the environment is absolutely ridiculous. However, there is a happy medium. There's somewhere that falls in between where we can promote getting these properties cleaned up, which is important to me, which can promote getting these properties developed, which is important to the communities where these properties are. And let's get business to come in, invest in these communities, create jobs. When those jobs are created, I sell a very basic human need. I sell shelter. I sell a house. And so if people will come here and they will buy these houses and they have a job, then the market will appreciate. Now, look, I'm not saying we needed to have the appreciation that some of these states had where 85%. That's a bubble, right? We don't want any part of that. But 0.8, that's embarrassing and that's ridiculous. And if anybody asks why the Realtors decided after however many years we've been in existence, why we finally decided to get involved in the governor's race in a big way, that's the answer right there.
Well, right. It all centers around, and frankly, I think this should be any organization out there. You have to look at what's happening in the state of Connecticut and say, okay, enough, because the more groups that stay silent, it's not getting better. There's always this hope that, these entities like yours, or whether it's the home builders or whatever other association organization out there, that they're going to be left alone if they don't play. Well, at the end of the day, you and I both know taxes are coming. Democrats they're not analyzing their spending. They want more revenue, which means more from your members. It means more from us as families. It means more money out of our pocket. And, I wish more entities would take a stand like yours did. And it's not because it happened to be with policies that you and I agree with. I think we recognize the state can't afford what they're proposing. And we're seeing the numbers. We're basing it off the information provided to us. And my favorite, and this is the thing that makes me really frustrated, whenever I hear a Democrat argue that we aren't an outbound state, I literally kind of scratch my head and say, how do you figure that? How do you figure that we know for a fact when U-Haul says Connecticut is losing population, but somehow the Connecticut Democratic Party says, no, we're not, based on nothing?
Yeah, it was very frustrating. I mean, we literally nothing out of saying people are leaving the state. We're not doing this. And I understand at some point, people are saying you have to be a cheerleader for the state. There are no bigger cheerleaders for the state than real estate agents. We sell Connecticut. A few years ago, Representative Kokaruda she was speaking at an event that I was hosting on the shoreline, and she said, you sell Connecticut. Your job is to sell Connecticut. Our job as legislators is to give you a Connecticut to sell, and we're not giving you a Connecticut to sell. We need a Connecticut to sell. I'm bound by law and by license law. I can't over-exaggerate. I have to tell people how things are. And look, it's not top secret. The people that are moving and that are leaving, and are people coming here, J.R.? I'm not going to lie to you and tell you we're not moving people into the state, but the statistics you hear that the people that are coming here are not earning at the same level as the people that are leaving is true. And not only losing, look, there's so much impact on it. Let's take something we've been against is the estate tax. Not only we're losing people because of the estate tax.
Well, so that everyone, I just want to take a pause for it. So that everyone understands this listening, the estate tax is essentially a tax. If someone passes on, the state of Connecticut will get a piece of whatever the estate may be. And then there's a federal estate tax, but Connecticut, not every state has an estate tax.
I think we're unique in that sense. We're the only state to have a estate tax and a gift tax.
Correct.
And what we see people that are leaving the state because of the estate tax. Now, I'm not their financial planner. I'm not their estate planner. I have to take them at their word if that's why they're leaving. And I have to take my members at their word that are telling me people are leaving for this reason. But not only are they leaving the state and selling their properties, but they're taking their philanthropy dollars with them.
Correct.
They're no longer shopping at the local grocery store or the local meat and not getting their hair done at the local beauty salon. And they're not hiring a landscaper anymore. So we're losing all the residual impact that has. And again, all we're trying to do is say, let's bring the stakeholders together. I'm saying everybody belongs at the table. But to make decisions like are being decided right now, and I understand that there's real estate brokers and agents that are members of the legislature, but to make decisions that are going to impact the real estate market without the Connecticut Association of Realtors in the room is irresponsible.
Yeah, well, and the other thing, and I actually thought of this, and I've heard this a couple times before. There was a Democrat state rep that was always like, "Oh, Republicans only, we have so much to offer people. We should be, to your point, of selling. We're proud of Connecticut. We're going to sell it." To me, that's akin to a used car salesman that wants to focus on how shiny the new paint coated, the paint job is. Meanwhile, the engine doesn't run. Right. So you have what essentially Democrats want us to do is they want to sell an idea that Connecticut is this wonderful, great place, but the insides don't work that well. But don't pay attention to any of that. Don't worry. Don't focus on the fact that we pay the second highest amount of state and local taxes in the country. That should be irrelevant to you. Look how pretty the trees are. It's insane. And frankly, you know what the other funny part about it is? You're going to laugh because I know that one of the things that people consider when they're moving in and out of Connecticut and which communities they move in and out of Connecticut is education. And now the Democrats are destroying one of the best attributes in our state because they're trying to take state control over education quality in the state of Connecticut. That's the other thing that makes it so shocking because real estate is directly tied to quality of education in the state of Connecticut. And so the Democrats are on a mission to also destroy the uniqueness and the freedom for a local community to have control over the quality of their own education, which, as you know, is a great selling point for realtors.
Yeah, look, I will tell you, it is probably it's at the top of people's list. If you are a couple or anyone that is either thinking about having children or has school-age children, the education system, the school system that you're in, there's greatschools.org. If you go on Zillow, you go on any of these Realtor.com, they're all going to give you school ratings. It's there for a reason. It's there because people are making a decision. I don't know the inner workings of, what's going on with regionalization and really what that means. Frankly, I don't know a lot about what a lot of legislation means. I still don't know exactly what the tolls are going to mean to me or what it's going to cost me, or where they're going to be or how many they're going to be. I have to say this. That is a very valid statement. And I think you just need to bring the stakeholders together and find out. I've heard stories where people have decided to back out. And I don't know these to be true, but I trust the people that told me these in certain communities, that people were actually moving into a community for a school system. And many times it's for a special education program. And so people are going to buy a house if they have special needs children to get into a school system. And now they're frightened that this may be something that they might go and invest in a community, invest in a house, and then they won't be able to get that same type of special education for their child. And as a parent, I would imagine that would be very scary to me. And do I make an investment? So I just think whatever we do and the changes. Look, JR, let me go back and answer your question. The thing that we need to do here in the state of Connecticut is we need to grow. And I've yet to see any legislation or any proposal that are talking about us growing in business, in the real world. What we look at when our margins are diminishing, we don't look at, hey, maybe we should put a snack tray in the break room so we make more money off of our people that are already underpaid, whatever the case might be. What we're saying is, how do we grow our business? If you're a stock exchange company, someone is looking to you, they're looking at you to cut expenses, and they're looking at you to generate new business. They recognize in the real world that raising your cost to do business is not the way to solve this. We need to get out of the way, and we need to become. Look, I was a real estate developer, and I came into brokerage. I know when I went before a planning and zoning board, I was looked at like I was going to clear every tree, and I was going to pave every ounce, and there would be no grass. And I understand that mentality. I understand people are very concerned and they want to do that. But look, that's not always the case. But the reason I am no longer a real estate developer is because the process became so adversarial. You may or may not know, I sat on the economic stability and fiscal and economic growth.
The commission, yeah.
And one of the things that was interesting to me when I sat on that, there were groups that came and said, look, we got to get rid of legislation, so regulation. So every time you add a regulation, take two away. Look, there's a happy medium there, JR, in my book. So as a builder, as a developer, it wasn't always the regulation. It was navigating the waters. So how about when I walk into the office, instead of them being adversarial and trying to scare me away, how about they steward me through the process? I could live with the regulations, just help me get there, right? We were going to participate in a study. Connecticut Realtors is going to participate in a study about big box development around the country and how long it takes. Now, I don't care where you stand on Walmart big box or Home Depot versus the little guy. They're relevant for this example. But in the country, there are places where it takes 3 months to get an approval to build a Walmart or that type of development.
Right.
In Connecticut, somewhere between 2 and 3 years, and some ridiculous amount, 50%, 40% of the time involves litigation. Who do you believe that cost is being passed on to, right? So look, am I against big box development or big box development? Neither. This is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is 3 months in some parts of the country and 2.5 to 3 years, and usually involves litigation, which is not cheap litigation here in Connecticut. That is a problem.
Right. Well, Connecticut's got lots of problems. I don't know that we're going to solve them all today, but I do really enjoy. I'm glad you came on to talk about the list. And before I let you go, I'd like you once again just to emphasize the point. What were those numbers again in terms of values of people's homes?
Yeah, sure. The national average for home value appreciation between 2010 and 2017, the national average was 43.3%, and in Connecticut, we were the lowest at 0.8%.
And where are those statistics from?
There was from an OPM report to Governor-elect Ned Lamont. It was a full report, had all different, we of course honed in right on the items that were of particular interest to us and to the real estate. And if I remember correctly, I think it was on page 16 on that report, which is, I'm sure, publicly available. And I'll share that with you, JR, if you want to post that.
Oh, no, we're going to post it.
We'll definitely get you. I'll forward that to you.
I appreciate it, Mike. Mike Barbaro with the Connecticut Realtors Association. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, JR.
Again, J.R. Romano. Thanks, Mike.